Australian Foreign Minister Penny Wong is on her way to Israel and inexplicably will not be visiting the site of the October 7 terror attacks. Now, when she was asked why she won't be visiting where those horrendous attacks happened, well, she didn't even bother trying to explain. Have a listen.
Minister, why are you going to the site of the October 7 massacre when you're over there?
I will be meeting with survivors of that attack, as well as families of hostages, and that will be important.
To not travel the 90 minutes from Jerusalem to the southern border where these attacks happened is just incredibly disrespectful, Joe. I mean, this was the greatest slaughter of Jewish people since the Holocaust. You go to where it happened, you pay your respects. But the other thing about this, and you've been to Israel as I have.
Been to that area, yeah.
There's nothing like going there to give yourself perspective, because without being there, you can't appreciate just how small the area is and just how close Israelis and Hamas actually occupy that territory. So this would help her with perspective, and God knows the Albanese government needs some perspective when it comes to this conflict.
Yeah, to be honest, I'm struggling to understand why she's going at all.
I think we all know
clearly there is a purpose for it, and I wonder if it's actually to placate the other side of the debate rather than the Israelis. But yes, I have been there. I went there as a guest of the Australia-Israel Jewish Affairs Council. It was incredibly enlightening. It is an incredibly small country. It's sort of little slivers and ribbons of a country. I think the point, I actually met one of the illegal settlers there, and I was very disapproving of that, and I think that the settlers do have a lot to answer for when it comes to provoking this debate and stalling a negotiated settlement. But I did find it passing strange that at the same time as she's going to Israel on the eve of her departure, there was a story, would seem, dropped to the 9 newspapers saying that these settlers should be treated in the same way as terrorists, in the same way as Hamas. Now, if that isn't a false equivalence and a ridiculously false equivalence, I don't know what is. And then to say, oh yes, I'm going to meet the victims of the terror attack and the families of the hostages, but I'm also going to be meeting with these people who want these illegal settlers considered terrorists, that really is, I think, a bit of whataboutism, and makes me think, is she actually going to placate parts of the Labor Party and the Muslim community in Australia, perhaps? So I think it's condescending to them to do this, to say, oh, we're just going to go there and, stand up to Israel for you and make sure that they're doing everything right. I think it's a really weird thing to do, and I don't like it.
Well, I mean, plus, Liz, this visit is 3 months after the event, so she's turning up late and then adding insult to injury by not, as I said, travelling. It's only 90 minutes from Jerusalem, and apparently her office said it just doesn't fit into her itinerary to be able to get there. It's a bit inconvenient.
Well, I don't think it's inexplicable, like you said, and I think it's very obvious what they're trying to do here. She's trying to check the box by having said, well, I did it. I went to Israel after the pressure that's being placed on them from those of us here in Australia, which are the vast majority who support Israel and their right to defend themselves and indeed to exist, which is the reason why they're defending themselves. But this is very consistent from our foreign minister, who has done nothing since October 7, then eventually and most recently call for ceasefire, but has condemned Israel, keeps talking about them breaking international law. She can't name a single international law that they have broken, mind you. Always watch that. People who want to quote international law like it's some nebulous thing. No, refer us to the passage in what piece of international legislation exists with any legal teeth whatsoever that Israel has broken. You can't, because they haven't. So very sick of that line from our government and many others who are overtly pro-Palestine, which is what this foreign minister is, which is what this government is. And no one can say, oh no, Albanese, he's been stronger on Israel, he's been more supportive. This is a government that acts in tandem Like I
think the Labor Party is definitely split. I can promise you the Labor Party is split on this, and there are a lot of people in the right who are just as mortified.
So Albo can't get his foreign minister into gear.
Well, Albo and Wong.
I think Albo's very much a pick and stick kind of guy, and so he would support Penny Wong even if he privately wishes that she would not have not made some of the comments.
That is nonsense. We're talking about the global stage here, Joe, and you're telling me the Prime Minister can't tell his foreign minister to pull her head in and actually represent Australia's position.
I think if you look at the language he's used and the language that Penny Wong's used, it's very different. He never called for restraint in the aftermath of the attacks. He said very clearly that he is with Israel and against Hamas. He's been attacked by left-wingers. I heard an anecdotal report that someone actually came up to him in a restaurant and started shouting at him, and he told them to F off, which was fantastic, I thought. I don't know if that's true. That was something, a tale that someone posted on social media.
The other problem...
Again, he's being targeted by the left as being too pro-Israel.
He has done absolutely nothing.
Well, he's done worse than nothing, Liz.
Who accused Israel of war crimes. He has done nothing. And that kind of silence when it's Prime Minister of our nation is completely unacceptable and shows up where he truly stands, which we can roll the tapes of him as a brown-haired young man speaking very passionately. But from where
I'm just saying that I know you would like to see him be more overtly pro-Israel. I would too, but from where he's come from, which is such an institutionally baked-in ideology among the hard left. From where he's come from, he is way to the right of where he.
But Joe, in terms of him being overtly Israel, he's not even halfway there. I mean, Penny Wong, our Foreign Minister, arrives in Israel with Australia refusing to condemn this move by South Africa to have Israel tried for genocide. America have condemned it. The UK have condemned it. Germany have condemned it. But the Australian government said, well, we're just going to wait and see what happens.
We know exactly where they stand.
I think there is certainly truth that in purely cold-blooded political electoral terms, the Labor Party has far more to lose from supporting Israel than it does from not or just sort of trying to play a sort of a dead hand.
And who among us wants such a completely conviction-bereft
That's right. And again, it is not something I like, but there is clearly, I think, a bit of realpolitik going on. No one has told me that overtly, but you only have to look at who's spoken out, what their electorates are, the fact that I have many former really senior Labor figures and people behind the scenes often saying the exact same things I'm saying to you, and we are in lockstep in one. But in terms of publicly elected MPs, public statements, you are just not seeing that. So I think there is a lot of frustration within the party, but all the noise is coming from the hard left, and I think there are a lot of people in the middle just putting their heads down and hoping it goes away.
But can't these people read polls? We get that they're shilling for votes. We get it. You're absolutely convictionist, limp-wristed, just pathetic people. And most of us Australians are ashamed to have you sitting in our parliament. You do not represent us in any way, shape or form, but we're stuck with you until the next election. So much the worse for us. We do get that. They're shilling for votes. But where does it come in that you just do what is right? For crying out loud.
Yeah, look, again, and they should. They absolutely should. I think the problem is, and I don't think it's even necessarily a deliberate cold-blooded decision, having said all of that. I think for them for a lot of people, like you've got both Albo and Penny Wong, both from the left. I think that's the first time a Prime Minister and a Foreign Minister have both been from the left faction of the party. That is a problematic situation, you might say.
But you've already argued that he and Wong are kind of not on the same page.
No, that's right, and that is as it should be, and that is right. I'm glad that he has been much more to the centre. But again, he would think from where he's come from, as hard as it is for most of us here to believe, he would think that he is actually being very pro-Israel from all the lefties of the people
that is very
screaming at him, telling him so.
He's not fooling anyone.
And so the people that so you've got the activist, I suppose, base, or the inner city activist base of the Labor Party that is all rah pro-Palestine. You've got all the MPs, the Western and Southwestern Sydney MPs from the right, who nonetheless have huge Muslim populations in their electorate. So they've got to be sort of pragmatic. A lot of them are simply keeping stum and saying nothing. And I think when you have those kind of considerations and everyone's screaming at you every time you say that Israel is not a genocidal apartheid state, I think when you look at what they've come from and the sort of environment around them, in their heads, I think they think, and particularly Albo thinks, that they are being quite staunchly pro-Israel, and of course from the right everyone's saying, well, you're just not doing it.
Well, that's the amazing thing about this conflict. It's an international conflict but causing domestic chaos everywhere all around the world.